If you are a frequent listener to the podcast, you know that we have been sponsored by Fuji Sports for quite some time now. Whether you're looking for apparel, equipment, bags, or accessories, Fuji Sports has got it covered. Go to fujisports.com to see the latest selection of everything you need for your jiu-jitsu, judo, or MMA journey. That's fujisports.com. Let me take a minute to tell you about RŌL TV. If you're looking to take your jiu-jitsu to the next level and supplement your BJJ education, then RŌL TV has you covered. RŌLAcademy.tv has over 1,500 videos covering individual techniques, positions, and concepts, including seminars and workshops with top-level competitors and instructors like Chris Wojcik, Robert Drysdale, Aaron Hurley, Emily Kwok, and more. Whether you are a beginner or a more advanced student, RŌL TV is the online platform that can take your jiu-jitsu to the next level. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. This helps us bring you the great guests and amazing content that you've come to expect. In this conversation, Jake Mackenzie shares his experiences as a jiu-jitsu instructor and competitor, and the importance of building strong bonds with training partners. He emphasizes the therapeutic nature of jiu-jitsu and the resilience required to overcome challenges in training and competition. Jake shares his journey from a small town in Canada to becoming a prominent figure in the world of jiu-jitsu and the pivotal moments that shaped his career, including the challenges he faced while in Brazil and the family support that fueled his passion. Here's the RŌL Radio with a GFT 4th degree black belt, adult black belt world pro silver medalist, and black belt masters world champion, Jake Mackenzie.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we are live. Jake, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, I just finished teaching a couple classes, and I feel like the instructor struggle is bouncing between classes, students, other things that we do. Do you find yourself in these predicaments too, where you have to shift things between things and kind of wear multiple hats?
Oh, yeah. I've been really busy lately. I've had a school for about 2 years, so I still teach a lot of seminars. I'm still competing. I'm still training. I'm teaching, I don't know, maybe 18 or 19 classes a week at my gym. So, yeah, I hear you. I've been really busy with the gym lately, and I feel the same thing.
But this is kind of a contrary to what many people think. I mean, like there's this vibe of we just teach one class a week, we eat acai, go surfing, take naps on the couch. Talk to me about that. Do you eat acai, surf, and just take naps?
Well, it's too cold for me to surf here. I'm living in the east coast of Canada. We don't have any acai here, so I ate a lot of acai when I lived in Brazil. But I definitely do the naps part for sure.
Underestimated part, isn't it? I mean,
one of the best parts.
Would you trade your profession for anything else in life?
Oh, absolutely not. I love teaching jiu-jitsu. I find the thing that's harder for me than anything else is just kind of the travel. I still travel a lot for competitions, seminars, training camps, etc. But the actual, teaching jiu-jitsu or teaching seminars or training, I still enjoy that very much.
You know, it's interesting that you bring this up because I just talked to somebody else about similar, just business parts of all of this and just logistics of being an instructor, business owner, and then competing and traveling and so on. And they made an interesting statement that teaching jiu-jitsu is the easiest part of all of this.
Yeah, I would agree.
So let's get to this. Like a lot of people starting jiu-jitsu, there's probably hundreds, thousands of people listening to this right now, and they say, well, wait a minute, like jiu-jitsu is insane. It's so complex, it's so deep, it's so broad. There are so many different things that are happening, and we are saying that this is the easiest part out of all of this. I mean, this could be very discouraging in a sense.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu is very complex. I realize that more and more as a teacher because I'm dealing with people from all different experience levels, people that are brand new, people that are at a blue belt level, all the way up to black belt. And for me, I didn't really ever feel that. I just would come in class every day, try to learn a little bit, and I was completely obsessed with jiu-jitsu. I still am. I study all the time when I'm outside of the gym as well while I'm here at home. Uh, but it is very challenging as a teacher to kind of think about where I can kind of fill in the holes and the gaps for my students the most effective way possible.
Would you agree that teaching jiu-jitsu is very different than learning jiu-jitsu?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. I really enjoy it, but I find it very challenging.
Why do we find ourselves in this position? At least like in my mind, and I've witnessed this number of times. We have students who grow, take this journey upon themselves, and they get good. They compile the knowledge, if you will. They build their library, and then they want to teach, and the teaching part is sometimes rough.
Oh, for sure.
Why is it like one would think that if you know what to do, teaching shouldn't be that complex?
I think it just all comes down to training, right? Like if I'm training for a competition, I'm training really hard, I'm competing frequently, I'll compete well. The same thing with teaching. Like if I'm teaching a lot and I'm practicing my teaching, I feel very sharp as a teacher. There's never really times now where I'm not teaching because I have the school, but there would be times where I would, maybe go do a seminar tour in Europe for 2 months, and then I would just be living in Brazil for 7 or 8 months without having to teach, right? When I would go back to teaching seminars, I would feel a little bit rusty the first, couple of seminars before I got into my groove. But I think teaching is the same thing too. I think when you teach all the time, you're just honing your skills.
What is the hardest part about teaching for you?
I think for me, just developing a curriculum so that I can teach my students the most effective way to have a very strong grasp of like the fundamental concepts, the things that they're going to have to be good at. And then just you want to try to add and build on that every time that you're able to have an opportunity to train with your students, or anytime that you're doing like a new training block. So that's the hardest part for me. I want to give them the shortcut, right? I want to give them the answer without them having to beat their head up against the wall like I did for many hours, right? But it's tricky.
Is that even possible?
I think to a certain extent, like, there's a lot of things that I teach that I wasn't taught that took me years to learn, right? Just like basic positioning, just different concepts on how to shut down guards, or it could apply to any position.
So
But
how come we find ourselves in this predicament? Because I think about this actually a lot, and it's been a couple decades for me, and like it over 20 plus years, things have evolved. Jiu-jitsu has changed.
Sure.
We changed too. Like we age, and it's just all these components, like moving parts, moving target constantly. And I completely agree with you. Like the way I was learning is very different the way I teach. What I was learning is very different what I teach now. So the question is, will 20 years from now, an instructor, whoever, I don't know, was brought up by me or you, will say the same thing?
I think probably. I think everything is changing, right? There's always new games, there's always innovations. Um, for me, I always had instructors, but I also studied so much and drilled so much on my own that a lot of the things that I do are things that I, learned from a multitude of different people. Like I've learned from people that were outside my team, or people that I had a quick chance to train with, but also a lot of things I kind of figured out on my own. There's things that, I developed in my game that nobody showed me. I just, played for hours and hours and hours and tried to find, smooth connections in between the positions. But I'm sure that is just ever evolving, and in 20 years, the teaching will be different than it is now, right?
So if that's the case, do you feel like that we almost, I don't know, counterintuitive, or like almost wasting our time in a sense of we invest so much passion, effort into all of this, while 10 or 20 years from now, some of it, maybe not all of it, but some of it might be irrelevant in a sense?
I think some of it will be, but I think the fundamentals stay true. Like if you look at the best guys, like Roger Gracie, he's the master of the basics, right? He could probably go win the worlds. If he signed up for the worlds, there's a good chance that he wins his weight in the absolute. But
Yeah.
he does absolutely nothing fancy, right? It's just
No.
Everything's in the details. So I think the fundamental concepts of jiu-jitsu will stay true. There'll be new things that are going to come up, but for me, I always try to bring young competitors from Brazil to my gym, so I can do training camps with them for like 6 to 8 weeks, so that I can stay up to date. Not so much that I'm not going to turn into like a Berimbolo player, because my back and my neck wouldn't allow it. But for me to be able to share this with the students, for them to have access to those style of games, so that we can stay on top of those type of things.
Is that evolution important?
Oh, I think it's very important. For me, I'm making the transition from, I was a full-time competitor, and now I'm much more a coach than I am a competitor. I compete, maybe 4 or 5 times a year, but I want to be able to offer the best resources for my students. So for me as a coach, I have to stay up to date with the new things that are happening in the jiu-jitsu scene.
How do you find that transition for you personally?
I find it really fun because it keeps jiu-jitsu new for me. Right? It's not doing the same old things. I'm always trying to develop new skills. A lot of times when I compete, I still do a lot of my A game, things that I had success with for years and years. But in the training room, I'm always playing with new things, trying to add new tools. And I think that's the fun part of it.
A while back, I had Broly Esteem on the show, and he said, he made something, it just stuck with me for a while now. He said, competing, it's a very selfish act. Instructing and teaching is selfless.
100% right.
Why do you feel that way?
I think for competition, you really have to focus on you, right? Like, you have to be focused that you're preparing yourself the very best. And in training, you have to give yourself to the whole room, right? You have to make sure that every single person in the room, I'm being able to convey the information. They're being able to execute the techniques, right? When I was a professional full-time competitor, I would only really worry about myself, my own training. I had like my main training partners that I lived with, that I trained with for years, and we all tried to develop each other. So it wasn't 100%, selfish. We were always trying to grow as a group, but it is much more focused on, your personal development, your personal growth.
You've had an interesting path from the beginning to today.
Sure.
You've had an opportunity to train with many different well-known people, Mario Fetosa, Cyborg, and many others in between. You've traveled quite a bit. What is the best part? Pin it down to one of all of this. Your entire journey. I mean, you've been on the mat for how long now? When was your first day?
It's going to be, I've been training for about 28 years. So
28.
I started 1997.
A long time.
A long time. Yeah, I started when I was a kid. I was 12 years old. I think the best part about the whole experience is the friendships, right? The people that you meet throughout the years, the people are lifelong friends. I have people that I see maybe, once every 10 years, but we were really good friends for a certain period of time. And once I see them, it's like nothing's ever changed, right? I'd say that, and the adventures, getting to travel the world, getting to compete. I've competed in probably, I don't know, between 20, 25 countries. So, getting to experience different cultures and getting to go, getting to see jiu-jitsu from different cultures as well. But I'd say those are the two most important things, the friendships and the adventures, right?
I was smiling and laughing inside when you mentioned the friendships. That's a unique dynamic, isn't it? I feel like people who don't do jiu-jitsu, they don't understand the chemistry that takes place. From one side, we want to kill each other, but from the other side, we would kill for the person, wouldn't it?
For sure.
Why do you think we develop such a strong bonds with these guys and girls on the mat?
I just think when you roll with somebody over and over again, especially, you have a very strong sense of their character, right? Like, it's very hard to hide who you are on the mat, right? If I'm rolling with somebody and I keep on, trying to do something dirty, or, I'm not being a good training partner, that really kind of is a good reflection of me, right? Or if, I'm a really good training partner, I'm very respectful, I'm trying to take care of my partner, at the same time going very hard, then that's also a good reflection of the person, So I think you really get to see who's who once you start trying to choke each other's necks and try to twist each other's arms, right?
That's the best part, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Why do we trust each other so much? I mean, like from one side, we literally, we put ourselves in a life-threatening situation, and yeah, people will say, yeah, you can tap, and we know each other and all that other stuff. But I mean, it doesn't really take much for this to really bridge over to the dangerous side, and injuries or even life-threatening situations to take place. Like, oftentimes that's ignored, isn't it?
Oh, I agree with you 100%. I've always been very selective in who I trained with, especially coming up, not so much. When I was younger, like I'd roll with anybody, any weight, didn't really matter. I just always wanted to challenge myself. And as my career started to progress and I started to win, and I started to have success at a high level, I became very selective of who I trained with. If I trained with somebody and I felt like they were like a reckless training partner or somebody that, this guy's just, he doesn't really have any regard for my body, that would probably be the last time that I would train with that person. I had always coming up as my career, I had like a small group of people that I was very close to that I knew would try to kill me when we trained, but would also take care of me. And I would try to reciprocate and do the same thing. I would go 100%, but I would try my absolute best to never try to hurt anybody in training or try to be a good training partner, So I think there's a huge responsibility. I try to preach this to my students all the time that, the number one goal is to take care of your training partner. It's impossible to get good at jiu-jitsu by yourself, right? Number two, there's no such thing as winning and losing. It's all skill development, right? At the tournament, there's winning and losing. In the training room, winning and losing doesn't exist, in my opinion, right? It's all just trying to get better. So those are the things that I try to like kind of come across with the students, make sure that they understand that. But there's a huge responsibility as a training partner.
So what's more important? Taking care of whose responsibility is it? Let me rephrase this way. Whose responsibility is it? Is it me being a good training partner? Or is it me taking care of that training partner and being good to them?
That's the thing. It's complicated. It's a two-way dance, right? If you're being a great training partner and you put me in an armbar and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to tap to this armbar, my arm's fully extended, you can go as slow as you want. You're eventually going to hurt my arm, or if I twist the wrong way, right? So there has to be a lack of ego in the training as well. Like I've always been quick to tap in training. I tell my students all the time, I'm like, I've tapped probably over 1 million times in my life, and I always tell them when I bring young guys from Brazil, I'm going to be 40 in a couple of months. The young guys that I bring from GF team are probably from 20 to 25. I tell the students, I said, that's good for you to get to see me getting tapped or getting beat because, it's not a big deal. If somebody taps me, I have a big smile on my face, I shake their hand and we keep going. It's just part of the process,
So why is this so difficult for many others who, especially at the beginning of that journey? I feel like that's a very difficult lesson for many to learn, especially guys. I feel like it. Like, and we all talk about leave the ego out the door, be good training partner. Like, this is nothing new. And like, thousands of people talked about this all the time. And yet, every day there's a new person starting, and every month there is that ego check that takes place, and people don't want to tap. Why?
I've been there before too. When I was younger, I have a great example of this. One of my really good friends, I haven't seen him for about 10 years, but he's somebody that taught me a ton of jiu-jitsu. He's not a big name jiu-jitsu guy or anything like that. He was just he was like the superstar purple belt in the gym that I trained at in Brazil for about I'd say between 6 to 8 months. And we continued our friendship and trained for years. I trained with him all the way up until we were black belts. But I was one of the better purple belts in the room. I could gauge myself, and I would do good against every other purple belt pretty much. this guy would smoke me when he would train with me. He would tap me 4 times in a 5-minute round. He would just maul me. If I scored a point on him, I was automatically getting tapped 10 seconds after I scored on him. I think my record again, like he'd probably beat me 500 times, you know? And I remember I was much more dedicated in the training than he was. We were roommates for a while. We lived together for about a year. And I remember the first time that I was able to catch him, right? He had caught me 500 times. And the first time I thought, oh man, he's going to be pissed. He's going to come out. He's going to kill me now in the next round. He had a huge smile on his face. I could tell that he was just genuinely happy that I finally was able to give him a little bit back of what he'd been doing to me for years, right? And I don't think that's everybody's attitude. I know a lot of people have a bad attitude when they get tapped. But that single moment changed my outlook on jiu-jitsu a little bit, right? I thought, man, this guy's been kicking my ass for years, right? And he was genuinely happy when I was able to return the favor just one time. And I remember he told me, he goes, I've been waiting for years for that, right? He said, you work so much harder than me. I knew it was just a question of time. And, you know, he said, I'm really happy with all the progress you're making. And from that one experience, that changed my mindset a lot. I said, man, this guy had no ego. This guy wasn't holding on to anything. He just wanted to see his friend progress and get better. He knew how hard I worked and how much time I put in. So things like that, I think once you start to have those moments, it starts to change the mindset a little bit.
That's hard, isn't it?
Oh, it's not easy.
You talked about getting tapped out about 500 times. Many would quit. Many would say, screw this. This nonsense is out of control.
Sure.
Why didn't you?
For me, I think my beginning in jiu-jitsu made me very resilient throughout my career, because what happened was I'm from a tiny little town called Truro, Nova Scotia. I think the population's about 15,000 people there now, but when I was growing up there, was much smaller. It's just a very small rural community in East Coast of Canada. So we had this crazy opportunity that there was a guy that was a martial arts enthusiast in our little town, and he started to kind of like explore, go out. He went to go train with Hoist and Horion Gracie on the Gracie cruise way back in the 90s, like right after like the initial UFCs. He had gone and trained with Renzo Gracie in New York, and Renzo had told him, you should go to Brazil and you should train with my uncle Carlos, right? So him and Carlos started to talk, and Carlos was like, well, you should open up a Gracie Baja in Canada. And it was the first Gracie Baja affiliate ever, was in my tiny little town. There was no sister schools of Gracie Baja, I don't think, even in Rio at the time. So we had this unique opportunity that Marcio Fatoza, who was, I think he was the current world champion at the time. He had won the Mundials in 1996, and they had opened the school in 97. He came with Carlos Gracie Jr. So my first class was with these two people that are, you know, absolute legends. I had no idea who they were. I just knew that Carlos was somehow related to Hoist because I had seen the original UFC with my dad when I was young. I saw UFC, I think maybe 1 and 2. And so they had an adults class on the side, and they had a kids class going on at the same time. And the group of kids was small, right? It was me and probably like 7, 8 other kids, you know.
How old are you then?
12.
Okay.
Right. So, and a couple of the kids were like friends of mine from school or kids that I knew. And I was overweight when I was a kid. I was not an athlete at all. Right. And I was not coordinated. But I was probably the heaviest kid in the class, you know? So right away, I found out within probably like a couple of weeks that my weight was a little bit of an advantage. Right. So I would roll with the other kids, and I started to do good in the kids' classes. Oh, but I would slam the kids when the coach wasn't looking. I would grab them by the neck.
You were that guy, huh?
Oh yeah, I was the worst training partner, right? So I was really, you know, trying to hold on to my spot of being one of the better kids in the class. And
you were the enforcer. Huh?
I was trying to be. I was trying to be. So what happened was basically all the kids quit, you know, and I think me, not being a great training partner might have had a role in that, you know. So I remember Marcio told me after a couple of weeks, I showed up for the kids class, and my dad trained with me a little bit at the time. My dad trained for about a year, so my dad was really the one that pushed me into jiu-jitsu. Like, he didn't push me, but he told me, "Oh, I think you should try this out." I had really no idea what jiu-jitsu was. I had seen the UFC, but I really didn't have any clue. And so I remember I showed up for the kids class one day. There was no kids in the kids class. So Marcio told me, he goes, "Well, you're gonna go with the adults today." And every once in a while, I would train with the adults in the kids class because my dad did the class. I would roll with my dad afterwards. I roll with some of the guys that were friends with my dad in the class. And the first couple of weeks that I kind of got, mixed into the adults class where no kids came, I show up and I was the only kid. All the adults would take it really easy on me, right? So in my head, I was going home and I'm like, "Oh man, this jiu-jitsu stuff really works." Like I'm beating up these grown men in the class. And I didn't really have any idea that they were going super easy on me, right? And so that kind of like had run its course. And after a couple of weeks, they weren't letting me do anything. They weren't letting me armbar them anymore. Like, they were wanting to get the training in as well. So I probably had, I'd say, I don't know, I'd say from like 12 to like 15, I didn't beat anybody in the training, right? So all the guys were full grown men. They all had the same amount of experience that I did. And I wouldn't submit anybody. So I would just like try to practice my defense and survive. And jiu-jitsu was very frustrating for me in that time period because I was so in love with jiu-jitsu, and I would visualize on how to do the moves. But the problem was I couldn't do the moves to anybody, right? So
Was that because your size, or was it because you're simply, not an adult person?
I think because I wasn't an adult, like when you got the strength of a 13 or a 14-year-old,
Yeah.
and where I'm from, especially at the time, you're not really training with like, a guy that works like a 9 to 5 desk job. You're training with guys that do manual labor, right? So a lot of these guys are, working in the steel mill or working out in the woods. These are big, strong, sturdy dudes,
Yeah.
right? And they had the same amount of technique that I did, and probably even better because they could comprehend the technique better. They were an adult, right? But I remember when I was 15, Christmas break had come and for school, and I was hanging out with my buddies. I was partying a little bit, and I kind of was thinking like, man, what am I doing this jiu-jitsu thing? Like, I go to jiu-jitsu every night. I can't tap anybody, right? I can't even do any of the sweeps to people. And I was like this close to thinking like, okay, well, maybe I'll focus my energy somewhere else. And I remember after the Christmas break, my dad asked me the first day the classes start up again. I was playing the computer or a video game or something. And he was like, "Oh, you're going to go jiu-jitsu, right?" I said, "Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to go." He goes, "What do you mean you're not going to go?" And I said, okay. And so I went to jiu-jitsu. And I remember the worst guy. And we only had a small little group of people this time. We only had like 4 or 5 people that trained. We had a really small group. The Brazilians had left, and it was basically like the people that were still training. We had access to this space, and we started to train. And I remember out of the adults group, the guy that was probably the weakest link, he would kick my ass every day, though. He was the worst guy out of the adults, but he would beat me every single day. I remember I had a really good roll against him, and I was able to do some stuff. I don't think I was able to tap him, but I like got a couple sweeps off. I got a guard pass off. And I remember I went home and I was just on cloud 9. I couldn't believe. I was just like, oh my God, I was able to apply some of the techniques. Right. And I kind of slowly started working my way up the ladder with the adults. And then by the time, like probably 6 months in that time frame, when I was about 15 and a half, I could go toe to toe with all the adults. I could give them a really hard time. I would beat them sometimes in the training. Sometimes they would beat me, but I made this big leap. And I don't know if it was so much technically. I think that I just kind of was starting to get a little bit more like man strength. So that's really kind of what kept me into jiu-jitsu. And at that point, kind of, we were off to the races, right?
You talked about being frustrated quite a bit before that point of success. I feel like that jiu-jitsu frustration is one of the main reasons why people stop training. And you even described, sitting in front of computer or TV and your dad asked you and you're like, I don't know if I want to go. Why did you go? Why you didn't let the frustration take over?
I just think it was kind of part of my routine. Like, like when my dad put me on the spot and asked me, he said, "Are you going to go to jiu-jitsu?" And I was like, I don't know. He's like, "What do you mean you don't know?" I was like, "Okay, well, I got to go." I just kind of felt like it was, my dad never forced me to train ever, right? I was always something like, even when I was in that period where I couldn't beat anybody and jiu-jitsu was frustrating to me, I still loved jiu-jitsu. I still loved going and learning the techniques and practicing the techniques. I had a hard time when it came to the sparring part, right? But I was very lucky that he came and made sure that I went to jiu-jitsu that day, because I think that's really where things kind of started to turn a corner.
You ever thought about what would happen if you didn't go that day?
Oh, I have no idea what, if I wouldn't have stuck with jiu-jitsu, I have no idea what my life would be. I was a terrible student in school. I didn't like school right from the start, so
that's interesting. That's really interesting from a perspective that you say you didn't like school, yet you love studying jiu-jitsu.
Oh,
I mean, many compare jiu-jitsu as an education in a sense. You still need to use the same methods or similar methods of comprehension. You need to solve problems. You need to really sit down and think about things. You need to solve puzzles, and it's similar in school. So what is different between jiu-jitsu and the actual school as a school it is?
I hated school right from the start, right?
I think all guys do. I think that's probably our code.
Well, for me, when I was in school, I had dyslexia when I was younger, so I had a really hard time learning how to read. So all the kids could read before me. So right away, I just hated going to school. I had lots of friends at school. I was pretty popular and I liked hanging out with my friends at school. But the actual active school, it was a rough start right from the beginning. And I carried that all the way through high school. Like, I think I skipped 118 classes my senior year of high school. I would just go in and I would get them to mark my name down. I would just leave right away. I was just like, I didn't take school seriously in the slightest. And I have no idea what I would do if it wasn't jiu-jitsu. Like, I think I would probably be doing, obviously, some type of like manual labor job. But jiu-jitsu was just such a blessing. And for me, it gave me something that I could focus 100% of my energy into. And I still do that to this day. Like, for me, I come home, I study jiu-jitsu probably 2 or 3 hours a day on top of teaching, training, competitions, seminars. I still love to learn. I love to try to improve, understand things.
So what is it about jiu-jitsu?
I don't know. It's like a video game. You get to build your character up, right? Like, that's the way that I think about it. I'm always trying to look where my deficiencies are, the things that I do strong. And it's always that balance of trying to add new tools without letting things that you're good at kind of decline,
But that can be very overwhelming, can it be? I mean, just especially at the beginning of all of this. So I'm thinking for somebody who's starting today, and comes to your academy and they say, what? What are you saying that you watch videos or study for 3 hours? I don't have time for this nonsense. Like I wanna come and roll and I want to do few cool things or show me a self-defense or whatever the goal might be, objective might be. Do you think that might be overwhelming for some?
Well, I think that's a good thing about jiu-jitsu. I think that jiu-jitsu is for everyone, right? I think whether you want to come in and just get in shape, whether you want to come in and learn self-defense, whether you want to be a world-class competitor, whether you just want to come in and roll with your friends a couple times a week. I think that I think jiu-jitsu will give you, I think it'll help you with confidence. I think for people that don't have great social skills, it puts them in a social environment too.
Oh, yeah.
There's a therapeutic aspect to jiu-jitsu. Like it's very hard. Like if you go into the training and you have some stress from your life, it's very hard for you to think about those things when someone's trying to choke you, right? So I also find that too a lot, especially with the students. A lot of times they'll tell me like, "Oh man, I was having a rough week from work, and just every time I came in here, I was able to kind of like use jujitsu as a therapy session. Go home, I kicked my feet up. I was so tired from the training, I didn't have any energy to think about the things that were stressing me out." So there's a lot of positive benefits for, I think, physical and mental health from jujitsu. So I don't think you have to go and study. I think jujitsu, everyone is on their own personal journey.
What is it about jiu-jitsu that is so therapeutic? You are 100% right. I mean, I feel like there are days where, like, if I don't do it, I feel depressed almost in a way. Like, it's heavy, and it's like I'm not myself. Like, and some days, like, I might physically not want to do this because I'm exhausted, and yet my mind is seeking that stimulation. What is it about jiu-jitsu that is so unique?
I just think it's like human chess, right? It's just there's so much strategy, there's so much technique involved, especially when you're going against guys that are really present themselves as a big challenge. I just think it's so stimulating for the mind and the body, right? I think that's what the attraction to jiu-jitsu is.
You talk about growing up and there are frustrations and struggles, and then something flips, and you have this great moment where things stick and things start making sense. And is that because of your training, or is that because you matured into, an older teenager, and kind of you start processing things differently?
I think both. I think both, right? Like I would train 5 days a week when I was a kid. I was completely obsessed with jujitsu. Like I remember I bought like the 1997 Moonjials out of the Black Belt magazine that they had at the local grocery store.
For those who don't know, Black Belt magazine, that's like the only thing that we had to keep in touch with jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
Today, guys, I mean, I think everybody, we are so spoiled from a digital world and all of that, but I remember Black Belt magazine. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good,
And
good old times.
you'd be lucky if the edition of the magazine had one small article about Brazilian jiu-jitsu. A lot of times it was kung fu, karate, taekwondo, right?
Yeah.
But I remember I ordered the 97 Moonjials from there, and I got it as a Christmas present or a birthday present for my parents, right? And it was on a VHS. And I had one of those stretching machines, the ones with the wheel in the middle.
Oh.
So I would go home from school before jiu-jitsu if I wasn't hanging out with my friends. Most of the time if I had jiu-jitsu, I would go hang out with my friends for a little bit, but I'd go home and stretch for about, I don't know, in between an hour and two before jiu-jitsu.
Oh,
because
wow.
I had this thought that's like, I have to be super flexible, right? Because I'd seen Nino Chambray and some of the guys that influenced me from that era, right? So I would sit in that stretching machine. I could do the full splits in it when I was a kid. And I would sit in that thing and watch the Moonjials, the 1997 Moonjials, or the 98 Brazilian Teams Championships. I had that too. Those are the two VHS tapes I had for jiu-jitsu. I only had two. I would watch those fights over and over again, and I would be in the full splits for over an hour. I don't know how good that is for my hips and my joints and ligaments in my hips, but I'm still fairly flexible through my hips from doing that when I was a kid.
It's interesting what we do
Yeah.
as teenagers when we put something in our mind, isn't it?
Sure.
Do you think that stubbornness, in a way, that passion, that drive to become better shaped you to who you are today, in a sense of you're still doing this, many others don't, and you have your academy and you continue studying, you continue chipping away, no matter how you slice it, Jake, there is a shape of success that is behind this.
Sure.
You think that's one of the contributors?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Because for me, like I realized that I needed to leave Canada for me to excel, to be at the level that I wanted to be at. I had a I had these dreams of being like a world champion and a professional competitor from the time I started jiu-jitsu, when I couldn't beat anybody. I would daydream about, going to Brazil and competing, and I would daydream about all these things in my head. Um, and I think a lot of people from the jiu-jitsu scene here from way back in the day thought that I was probably nuts, right? Because I had these big dreams, but I had never competed, right? I competed a couple of times when I was like 15, 16, but I was starting to do kind of good in the training at that point. But I had lost first round. We went to the Pan Ams twice. I lost first round both times at the Pan Ams. I went to the Worlds in Brazil the first time I went to Brazil, and I lost the first round, you know. Um, so for me, it wasn't like it didn't deter me, right? I was like, man, I was faced with difficulty right from the start, So I was like, I know if I just keep my nose to the grindstone and I keep training, I'm eventually gonna be able to get to where I want to get to, right? Um, and at that point, I was when I started going to Brazil, you're the gringo in the room,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So the guys don't really want to teach you that much. They're there to kind of kick the crap out of you, you know. But it just takes time. Once you start to prove yourself to them that you're a respectful person, that I would come to training early. I'd be the first one on the mat. I'd be the last one to leave, right? Uh, Whether I did good against you in training or whether you completely wiped the mat with me, I'd look you in the eyes, I'd shake your hand, I'd say thank you for the role. I was trying to learn a little bit of Portuguese at the time. And that way you start getting people kind of take you under their wing. And I was blessed on all the trips that I did to Brazil in those first initial trips. I made good contacts with people that genuinely wanted to see me do well, right? And once those people can open up new doors for you, like, as soon as you're friends with one of the better guys in the room, well, people are going to look at you a little bit different, right? And for me, at that point, I was going back and forth from Brazil. I spent probably over half the year in Brazil at that point by the time I was a purple belt. And then I lived in Brazil. I lived in Brazil for almost 12 years. So I did a big, long stint from like 2011 to 2019, or 2019, 2020. And then a lot of trips in between that were 6-8 month trips, right?
So rewind a little bit. Whose idea is to go to Brazil?
It was my idea. So
How do you pay for this?
So this is the first thing. So actually, the initial idea was my dad's idea. So what happened was I was a blue belt and I was in high school, and there was no jiu-jitsu competitions in Nova Scotia, right? The closest was Toronto. Toronto's like a 20-hour drive for us, right? So I was a blue belt. I'd gone through the kids' belts, and I was wrestling a lot. I was competing a lot in wrestling because I had this dream of being a jiu-jitsu champion. But my dad told me, he was like, well, if you want to compete in jiu-jitsu, you need to know how to compete, right? There's no jiu-jitsu competitions around here. So I started wrestling. I wrestled for maybe 4 years here in Canada. And I was really enjoying that. I was still training jiu-jitsu a lot. And I met an exchange student in my high school, a guy named Lucas Suarez. And he was a blue belt from Brazil. And I had heard of my dad had met his host family, and they kind of set it up, and we trained a couple of times. And he was very good, really good training partner at the time. We didn't end up training a ton that year because he wasn't really focused on training jiu-jitsu. He wanted to have the full experience of, being a high school kid, going out and partying, meeting girls, doing the whole thing. So we probably only trained, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 times over the year. But we became really good friends. Every day I go to school, I'd hang out with them. Every day after school, I'd hang out with them. And so his parents extended the invitation to me. They said, "Oh, anytime Jake wants to come to Brazil to come visit, he can come visit." So I usually worked a summer job at the time once high school was over. And my dad told me, he said, "Whatever money you make, I'll match it." And my dad had a bunch of air miles too. So he had a bunch of air miles. He had a store. He had a paintball store. So he gave me the air miles, and then he matched the money that I had, and the exchange rate was good. And I stayed with a family. Like, I had a lot of things taken care of the first 2 times I went to Brazil. And I went for shorter periods of time. I think I went for 6 weeks the first time, and I went for 8 weeks the second time. Then I was done high school, and I had got a taste already of training in Brazil and seeing how high level the training was. So I worked for a year to try to save some money when I was out of high school. I moved out of my parents' house. I was living in Halifax, which is about an hour from my parents. And I saved up some money, and I told my parents, I said, my dad still had air miles at the time. So my dad gave me air miles for the flight. I said, but I have this money saved up. I'm going to go to Rio I think I went for 7 or 8 months. And I went with no real plan, just thinking, okay, this is going to work out the way it worked out before. But the first couple of times I wasn't in Rio, so I didn't know the city. I was in a different state, and I was staying with a family that.
Hold on. Before we talk about the Rio thing, I want to ask you, walk me through the day when you go to Brazil first time and you step onto mats in Brazil for the very first time. I imagine that there was a big language barrier.
Huge language barrier. There was a couple guys that could speak English.
Probably culturally, there's a big gap.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
You are first one from Canada, from a small town, training as a young man. You fly out to Brazil, even though you stay with somebody, you by yourself, essentially, right? Walk me through that day. You step on the mats for the very first time. What's going on? What's going through your head? Like, how are you feeling?
I was super excited about just being in that atmosphere, right? And getting to train with some of the guys. And it was good. Like, I trained at the little school that I grew up in. I trained there, and then when the Brazilians left, we had a really small group. So we would cross train with a group in Halifax. That's where I live now. That's where my school is. And it was a really tough club. It was a Renzo Gracie club. They would do MMA all the time. So I did a little bit of striking. I did some wrestling. I did some jiu-jitsu. So I think a lot of time I did some MMA as well. So I think that really prepared me to be ready for any training environment. Maybe skill-wise, the guys were a lot better than me, but it was tough, right? Like, I was used to getting punched in the face. I was used to wrestling, which is a grind as well. So I felt like I was at a good level for blue belt as soon as I went there. Like, I didn't feel like the guys were, light years ahead of me. I felt like there was guys that were definitely better than me in the room. There was a couple of guys that could just smoke me when we would train. But for the most part, I felt like I was kind of like right in the middle of the pack. But I noticed a big difference the next year I went back. I noticed that, I had taken the stuff that I had learned in Brazil on the first trip and really drilled it at Titans. That's one of the schools that I came up at. I trained there for years. That's in Halifax. And I really trained that with the coaches, Kevin Taylor and Peter Martell. Those are two guys that had a huge influence on me. And I came back with the skills. I showed them what I had learned, and we trained that like crazy. And for being in a small city, because Halifax is a city, it's not like a small town like where I'm from. There's about 400,000 people here. The two coaches that I had, Kevin and Peter, were both super smart guys. Like, they learned jiu-jitsu from VHS tapes, and they would take trips to New York, but they were very intelligent in their process of learning jiu-jitsu, right? So when I brought those skills back and I went back to Brazil the next year, even though I wasn't in Brazil, I made a big jump in my skill because we just put the time in, right?
So then you said you're going back again to Rio now by yourself, and that experience is different.
Oh, for sure. Because like the first 2 trips that I went, the family that I stayed with, they had a beautiful apartment. It was very close to the gym that I would train at, so I could walk to the gym. The city was fairly safe too in comparison to Rio, especially the neighborhood that I was staying in. It was a nice neighborhood. So, so this friend that actually initially brought me to Brazil, Lucas, he was studying in Rio. He was doing university. And I asked him, I said, hey, I have this plan that I want to go to Rio. Is there any way that you can help me out? And he said, yeah, I can help you out. I can try to help you as much as I can. He said, but I live with my aunt and my uncle. So there's no way that you can stay with me. I don't have my own apartment, but I'll do whatever I can to help you. So I showed up the first day, and I had my suitcase with my gis in it. I had money to stay for the amount of time that I wanted to stay for. He picked me up at the airport, and I remember we drove around Rio the first day trying to find a place for me to stay, and we couldn't find anything. We started at like 10 in the morning, and we went all the way to 10 at night. And he's like, I don't know what to do. He's like, do you want to stay at a hotel? I said, I'm on a budget for me to be able to stay for 6 months. Like, if I'm staying at a hotel, that's going to drain my budget, and I'm not going to be able to stay the time that I want to stay. He goes, hold on, I'm going to call my cousin. So he called his cousin, and I had met his cousin because his cousin had done an exchange program in a different city in Nova Scotia. So I had met him a couple of times. Really nice guy, Gustavo. And so he called Gustavo, and he said to Gustavo, he said, hey, Jake is here. I know you have your own apartment. I know you don't have an extra room, but it's like, do you have like a mattress or anything that you guys can just like chuck on the floor, and Jake can sleep here for a couple of days until we're able to find him an apartment? And the guy was like, yeah, for sure. So it took probably about like 3 weeks for me to find an apartment. And this guy let me stay at his house or his apartment for free. Super good guy. And actually in the apartment complex, there was a jiu-jitsu gym, right? So I remember the first night I got there, I went to sleep, and the second night, Gustavo said, he goes, oh, we have a little gym for anybody that lives in the building. And there's a jiu-jitsu instructor. He teaches a small jiu-jitsu class there like 3 times a week. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I was like, do you think I can join the class? He's like, oh, yeah, for sure. I'll go down and ask. If they say no, you can't do it. But if they say yes. So I remember he took me down, and the 2 guys that were teaching the class are 2 good friends of mine to this day. Ricardo Noguera, he was a black belt at the time, and then Pedro Paulinho. And Pedro was the guy that I stated in the previous story that had tapped me like 500 times. So, and those guys I still have a really good relationship with those guys. I don't have as much contact with them now. But those guys kind of pointed me in the right direction on where to train. I'm sure they helped me initially find a place to live that I could rent as well. So yeah, that's kind of the start of the journey, right? And I did that trip like a 6 to 8 month period. I did that 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010. And then I stayed for longer in 2011. And then I met my wife in 2012. And then I started to apply for the permanent residency visa. And I lived there pretty much all the way up almost until 2020.
That sounds like a crazy story.
Yeah.
Do you ever sit back and like think about it from that perspective? It's like many people dream about whatever they desire. Many people even develop a plan to get to the goals they want. But a lot of people fail along the way. In your case, it seems like you had a goal. There was a minimal plan, kind of shoot off the hip.
Sure.
And yet, you have achieved a lot of what you wanted to do. Many would consider you living the dream, essentially.
For sure. I think like one quality that I think was like beneficial for me in my jiu-jitsu journey was when I was committed to something, I wasn't scared of taking a risk, right? And Brazil, the trips to Brazil were a big example of that. I just kind of threw myself into a lot of like the best training environments that I had access to. And I wasn't, for me, I was just obsessed with training. So I wasn't scared to be like, oh, I'm going to miss home. I didn't really feel, I miss my family, obviously, right? I miss my mom and my dad and my sister, but I never really felt homesick for Nova Scotia or for Canada. And that time I was so, I guess I was so immersed in the training. for me, it was just taking things as they were coming day by day, or, I would always had a focus. A tournament would be coming up, so I'd be training. But I think also in my competitive career, I brought that attitude too. Like a lot of times, like when I would fight somebody that was a much bigger name than me, I really wouldn't put a lot of pressure on myself. I'd be like, this is an opportunity for me to try to make my name, and I'm going to shoot my shot. If it fails, so what? This person is a much bigger name than me. But if I beat them, that's going to start getting me to the platform that I want to be on, right? And that's kind of how I started having success in my career as well. It's just, I remember walking down to the mat in different tournaments against guys that were top level guys that were much more established than me at the time. I said, you know what? I'm going to take my shot. I'll throw the kitchen sink at the guy, right?
Is there a particular event that comes to your mind where that happened, where you were clearly an underdog and things sway in a positive direction in the sense of even a surprise of the result?
There's a bunch. I can think of a bunch of examples of that. I remember as a purple belt, when I first started going to Brazil, I would win the local tournaments sometimes, like the little ones, right? And I would, get a medal sometimes at some of the tougher local tournaments, but the bigger ones, I would fall short, right? I remember we fought the Rio State Championship, and at that point, this was almost as big as the Brasileiro. It's really big tournament, probably 2,500, 3,000 competitors. I remember that day for my bracket, I had like 58 guys in my bracket for lightweight purple belt, right? A lot of guys. And I had done good at a couple of tournaments leading up to that. I was kind of like on a hot streak, right? I'd won like maybe 3 or 4 little tournaments, and I was feeling really good. I was competing well. And I remember I put all this pressure on myself before the competition that I was gonna leave. I was gonna be a state champion, right, in Rio. And I don't think there'd been any other foreigner at that point that had done that. I remember we went out and I lost the first round of the tournament. And it was like this huge letdown for me. I was just like, oh man, I put so much time in. I was on this really good roll. And I remember the coach that I had at the time, he said to me, he goes, we're going to sign you up for the absolute. And I said, I don't really want to do the absolute. I'm super bummed that I lost, blah, blah, blah. And he said, no, I already put your name in. You got to do it. This.
It's not up to you.
It's not up to me, right? So I was like, okay. And so I remember we got to the absolute. The absolute was at the very end of the day. Like I got there early in the morning. I probably competed at like 10 in the morning. The absolute probably started at 10 at night, right? So when I got there, the gym was packed full of people.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not a big guy.
No, I was like 164 pounds at the time.
You were lightweight, right?
Yeah, I was a lightweight. And I didn't cut any weight to make that weight. I walked around like at 161 pounds a lot of times. It's just skinny. And I remember we started getting warmed up for the absolute. And I did the first fight, and I had a bye through the first round. I did the first fight, which was the second round. And I remember the third round, I fought this guy. He was a super heavyweight. And he had won the CBJJO World Cup, which was run by Novo Union. But the CBJJO at that time was on par with the IBJJF, right? So this guy was like a really high level guy. He was a black belt in judo, and he was like a cannonball. He was way bigger than me, and he was shorter than me. And I remember we had this crazy fight. I beat him like 6-6 on advantages, or maybe 6-4. I don't really remember, but it was a really close fight, really back and forth. And I remember my coach was really pumped after I beat him. He's like, oh man, that was the quarterfinals. You're into the medal rounds now. That was a super good match. So I had no idea who I was going to fight because they didn't have the internets on the bracket. All the brackets were done by hand. And at the absolute, they don't even show you the bracket. Just the bracket coordinator has the bracket. So I remember that I had a coral gi, because coral was really big back in the day, right? Mm-hmm. And I had the white coral gi, but it had the black lapels, So somehow my gi passed the check 4 times, right? Because I had done a couple fights lost the first fight, and I was in the 3rd or 4th round of the absolute. I was in the 3rd round. So it had passed the check 4 times, the gi. And I remember the guy that I was going to fight is a guy named Sergio Teixeira. He beat Rodolfo Vieira at the lower belts. He beat Bernardo Faria at the lower belts. He was a 2-time world champion. He was a blue and purple belt world champion. And I'd seen him fight probably 6 weeks beforehand at the Brasileiros, at the Brazilian Nationals. He won. And he fought in the absolute. And I remember being in the stands, I told one of my friends, I said, it's guys like that. That's why I don't go in the absolute. I was like, there's no way that I could beat that guy. That guy's 2-time world champion. I'm never going to take him down. He's got super good judo. He's, a monster on top. And I said, there's no way that I could beat that guy. He's just too good. Right. And I remember I literally had this conversation with somebody. So I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to fight this guy. That's what I was thinking before we're going to go out there. And I remember the head referee, the coordinator of the event, he comes over. He said, no, you're not going to fight with that gi. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, it's got black lapels on. The gi has to be all white. And I had already got 3rd place in the tournament. I was in the final 4 in the absolute. I said, okay, no problem. Just DQ me. And my coach, no, you're not going to DQ him. You're not going to DQ him. He's like, you can use my gi. But my coach was a middle heavyweight at the time. So
Oh my God, the gi is 3 times bigger.
Oh yeah, so I had this huge gi on, this black gi. They put it on me.
Wait a minute. So they stuck you with, you can wear this gi because it has black lapels, but they let you wear gi that's 3 sizes too bigger?
It was an A3. I was an A2, so it was about a size too big for me. But the sleeves went down to my fingertips almost. And I remember I was so scared of the guy. I thought, you know what? I just kind of went into autopilot. And I pulled half guard on him right away. And I swept him within like the first minute. And then he swept me back. And then it kind of turned into it was a crazy fight. It was one of the best fights I think I ever had in my career, probably. But it was like a street fight. We went under the table. We went on the concrete a bunch of times. But I think me, training MMA, training wrestling, training boxing when I was younger, that didn't really startle me. I was just like, okay, this is a jiu-jitsu fight. At any point, if I feel like I'm going to get hurt, I can just tap. This guy's not going to try to punch me in the face. He's not going to try to, he's not going to hurt me probably. And I remember we were getting near the end of the match and I was going on autopilot and I kept on thinking, I'm like, man, I'm fighting really good. And it was 4-4. And I swept him and we went out of bounds and I got 2 points. They stood us back up and I pulled him to half guard and I beat him. And I ended up getting to the finals of the absolute. And I ended up losing in the finals by an advantage. And so I didn't accomplish my goal of being the Rio State champion, but I didn't even have it in the cards that I wanted to fight the absolute. Yeah. Right. And when I beat the guy in the semifinals, it really made me believe in myself. I thought, you know what? If I can beat him, I can beat anybody in my weight division. And the next year I won the US Open. I won the Pan Ams. I got second in the Brasileiros in the absolute. I won a state championship in Rio. So I think that win there had a lot of, it had a big push on my success going forward, right? Because I believed in myself.
Would you consider that big pivot point in your life?
Oh, 100%. And there's been a lot of those. Like throughout my career, like at black belt, I competed at black belt adult for 12 years, right? And that's what my full-time job was. I was just a full-time competitor. And just within each belt level, but especially black, because I spent so much time competing at adult black belt, I had many turning points like that where I started to be able to break into a new level, right?
Is this what this whole thing is all about? To continue growing and stepping into the next level and kind of taking one step at a time to continue growing?
For me, when I was younger, it was all competition, right? Everything was goal-based, orientated. So I always had a goal. I wanted to win this tournament. I just kept on trying to climb through the ranks. And I was never a black belt world champion at the adult level. But I cracked into the top, I cracked into the flow grappling top 10 rankings, AGP, IBJJF. I was ranked 6th for a while in the IBJJF at adult black belt for my weight division. So I had different milestones, but the competitions were always my focus at that point that were kind of pushing me forward. But at this point, I feel somewhat the same drive, and the competitions don't drive me the way they used to, because for me, I'm competing at Masters. I'm going to be Masters 3 next year. The level is still very high, and I'm very motivated to go to compete. But for me, I look at it more as a craft now. I just want to hone my craft. I want to know that for my students, if they ask me, Coach, what's the best way for me to defend spider guard or spider lasso or inverted de la Hiva? I don't want to just have a shallow understanding on how to do that, just like a technique based thing. Oh, the guy does this, I'm going to do that. I want to have a deep conceptual understanding on what rules they have to follow to be able to succeed in as many positions that I'm going to be able to put in my, in my memory bank. So for me, I train all year round. I've always done that since I was a professional competitor till now, and before I was a professional competitor. I love training jiu-jitsu. For me, it's not like a job. I can go in and train all day, and it's what puts a smile on my face at the end of the day, right? So for me, I think it's always been about honing the craft, but now a lot more because I'm not a full-time competitor anymore like I was, right?
Yeah, no, it completely makes sense, and that passion of yours is really radiating. Like, it's very visible. Even as you speak, these stories, you tell these stories. It's fun to sit back and watch, and I keep smiling because it's there's so many people out there who struggle with life. There's so many people who like legit hate their jobs, and then I feel like you and we are lucky cats. Like, I could do this all day long, and like I don't like. There's many weeks where it's like 60-hour weeks and 70-hour weeks, and it doesn't bother me as much because I feel like we make impact on other people and we can help other people, and I just love it. And it seems
I
like
do
you do
too.
too.
Absolutely, 100%. I feel like I got the best job in the world.
We've been at this for over an hour, and we'll be wrapping up soon. But I do want to ask you one thing. There is no secret that none of this would be possible without your dad.
Sure.
He's the one who took you in. He's the one who, for the first time, he's the one who encouraged you. He's the one who didn't push you but sponsor you. He's the one who encouraged you and supported you on your crazy idea to going across the world to different country when you didn't know language or you had no idea what was happening. Seems like he was a pivotal person in all of this happening. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, him and 100% my mom too. I didn't really get into talking about my mom as much as well, but both of them um, were just like, my mom wanted me to have a backup plan. I think my dad wanted me to have a backup plan as well too, like in case jujitsu didn't work out. But for them, like, they supported me 1,000%. For me, like, they would drive me an hour to training and an hour back a lot of times every week, you know? And the same type of like financial support that I said that my dad gave me, my mom, the same thing. My parents are still together, and they just kind of worked as a team to support me. And I think as an athlete, that was probably one of the biggest benefits. This was for sure the biggest benefit that I had to be able to like pursue this career, is that I had two parents that they didn't have a lot of money, but the little money they had, they were invested in me 100% because they knew how passionate I was about jujitsu. Right. So, 1,000%. If my dad kind of wouldn't have kind of nudged me into doing jujitsu, and I wouldn't have had my mom and my dad, to help me pursue this dream, it would have just never ever happened. I never would have trained jiu-jitsu in the first place, right?
They must be proud of you.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
Do you ever talk to them about all of this? It's like, hey, Dad, do you remember the one day when you told me to go to jiu-jitsu? I didn't want to, and like, look at me now. Like, do these conversations ever come along?
Yeah, every once in a while. I'll talk with my mom sometimes, and she'll ask me different stories about different places I've been to, and she'll always say, my dad says the same thing. The jiu-jitsu gave me so many experiences, whether I was going to teach seminars or going to compete or just people that I've met, friends that I've met. I have friends from all over the world, that I don't get to see all the time, but, I'll shoot them a message every once in a while, or I'll give them a call. But yeah, we sit back and we think about that sometimes. But yeah, like I said, that was the biggest thing I had going for me was two parents that were super supportive and that were willing to sacrifice their time and their money, which they both didn't have a lot of, to be able to see me be happy and succeed in something that I really was passionate about.
Do you ever think about the simple fact of when you were starting this? Oh, you have a cat.
Oh, I've got two cats.
It's on
Oh,
top
he's
of
on top of the
it's in the
fridge.
Look at that little. I have a cat too.
There's
They
another one
love
around here
climbing.
somewhere.
They love climbing, don't they?
Oh, they're the best.
Little distraction there. Have you ever thought about the simple fact of when we were both starting all this, when you were starting all this, make this by you, these opportunities didn't exist. Not only from the fact of you being in a small town, not from the not forget about the fact that jiu-jitsu didn't exist in your town, but just jiu-jitsu was not what it is today. A thought of teaching jiu-jitsu in 2000, it didn't exist. Like, first, if you are not Brazilian, you are not teaching. That's number one.
For sure.
Two, just the whole idea of making money on jiu-jitsu or from jiu-jitsu was not even in a realm of reality.
Sure.
And today, you find yourself in a position where this is your life. This is how you this is how you put food on the table. This is your career. This is your job. This is your profession. This is how you shape your life and support your family.
Yeah, I think a couple things fell into place for me that opened up doors that, I don't really know if I would have pursued jiu-jitsu if those things didn't happen. Like initially, the guy Chuck Sproul, who was the guy that opened the initial Gracie Baja in my little town, I never would have ever thought about doing jiu-jitsu if that didn't happen, if my dad wouldn't have kind of like nudged me into doing that. And then, meeting Lucas in high school and having the opportunity to go to Brazil and experience that culture. And then kind of like that, lighting that fire that like, oh, I want to go back to Brazil. That's where I've got to go if I want to, pursue jiu-jitsu to the level I want to pursue it, So sometimes I look back on these little things that happened in my life and they kind of just fell into my lap, so it's kind of like almost seemed like destiny, right? But I also had the courage to take those chances and put myself into maybe environments where I didn't feel super comfortable, that I knew I would be able to grow in those environments, right?
Things happen for a reason.
Absolutely. 1,000%.
Good for you. Good for you. I love success stories. I love the underdog winning. And from what I'm hearing from you, things fell into place and you were in the right place in the right time. But also the grind and the work, the grit that you have shown over the years, nearly 3 decades. I mean, all that pays off, and all that is, puts you in a position where you are today. So, Jake, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing your story, sharing those stories and really being vulnerable. I think many people find point of success, but they're unwilling to share it. And today you opened up, and that was amazing. Before we wrap this up, if anybody wants to connect with you,
sure,
anybody wants to reach out to you and perhaps come and train with you, or perhaps they are looking for some kind of support or advice, where can they find you? Are you social media, websites? Where are you at? Where are you easy to find?
You can come to my school, Jake Mackenzie School of Jiu-Jitsu in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We have a website. You can find us on Google. So if anybody wants to come train with me, we have visitors come from the U.S. all the time, all over Canada. We always have people dropping in. I have friends from Brazil coming to train. My wife is also a black belt. She's a high-level black belt. And so if you want to come train with us, you can come train with me and Melissa at our school. I do use social media. So if you send me a message on Instagram, or I have Facebook as well. Sometimes I don't go on those as much, but if you reach out to me, there's a good chance you'll get a hold of me. And I'd say that's the easiest way.
And as always, guys, I will post all the links in the show notes of this episode. So if you guys want to connect with Jake, you want to visit him, you want to ask him questions, or just follow up on his great and amazing story, I encourage you to take advantage of this. Jake, thank you for being here. Once again, I love the story. I love what you've done with your life, and I wish more people took opportunities that they are presented in front of them, and perhaps take a little bit more risk. I think life is too short, and if we simply stay stagnant, we just sometimes come short. So it's great to see what you've done.
Thank you very much. It's my honor to be here on the podcast with you. I had a great time, and thank you again for the invite.
All right, Jake, let's wrap this up for today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.